Thanks for having me. Thanks for showing up. My name is Gabriel Sechrist. I lived most of my life in Oregon. Has anybody been to Oregon? There you are in the back. So I graduated from the University of Oregon. Um, seen a lot of, if you're a sports person, I've seen a lot of, like, if you were familiar with the Celtics, Peyton Pritchard, I got to see him a lot at the University of Oregon, but he plays for the Celtics. He's like a 6, 7 man off the bench. Either way, I've been in sales for security for probably 15 years or so. I've worked for four pretty good sized tech companies, but I just wanted to get a sense in the room of what you guys kind of know about data security, what kind of job paths you guys are looking into. I know that's really like a lot to ask, but no wrong answers. I don't want to have to pick someone, so I'll leave it up to you. What do you know about data security?
I'll throw prizes that we move on to.
I do have some gift cards at the end for participation, by the way.
Well, I got pens.
So yeah, anybody heard of like firewall security? We'll just go raise a hand. So have you heard of endpoint security? Have you? Yeah, in the back. Yeah, yeah. Mobile security. Let's make it easier, right? Let's on your phone. What kind of security do you got on your phone? You got like two-factor authentication, right? You got like maybe facial recognition, right? Um, if it was up to you to protect Bentley University, how would you begin protecting the physical and virtual assets of the school? Where would you begin? There's no wrong answer.
Well, what do you know is already good?
Yeah, what do you think they are doing? I always think if you like put in perspective how I guard my personal data, how would I protect like the workers, the students, staff, um, any kind of stakeholder? How would you go about it?
Well, since the first thing that you would have about the ID.
There you go. Yep. How would you extend on that?
I had a different point.
Oh.
We also download this authenticator app on our phone so I can log into other devices.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Circling back.
I was gonna say like that.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. No, it's really good. Email is a big one. I've never actually sold email security, but I mean, if you think about access points into any organization, email is huge, right? And a lot of people talk about cybersecurity, ransomware attacks, but the real big one is social engineering, if you're familiar with. And that's really just kind of like fooling the person on the other end. So, for example, have you try to log in, maybe like Verizon, this happens to me on Verizon all the time. I'll log in to pay my bill, and then they want to make sure it's me, right? They send me a text. So there's this big company out of Texas, and the CISO, cyber, the Chief Information Security Officer, sorry, he kept getting that alert, like text from a hacker group. Text. He got like 20 of them. He's like, bing, 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 bing. And that's like, did you want to get access here? And finally, he got so annoyed, he just said, go, right? Ends up like a multi-million dollar data breach at his company, big healthcare company out of Dallas. But it's just things like that. That's where you trick the individual, right? There wasn't a piece of software that could have stopped that from happening, right? That was human error, right? So when we think about data security, you're not just talking about, physical and virtual assets. You're really talking about email security, or what kind of personnel security do you have around social engineering? There's kind of like three broad paths when it comes to entering into cybersecurity from a job perspective. Um, can anyone guess one of those paths? It's on the tip of your tongue. I know.
Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah. So three broad paths. So like if I was going to go into tech, right? So maybe 2, 3 years from now, you'll be in the job market and you're going to go on to Indeed, or you're going to go to Monster or something, and you're going to be like, hey, ding, 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 I want a job in this field. If we broke it down into like 3 sections, what would be one of those career paths into cyber?
Software.
I like it. Development. I like it. So that's more on the engineering side, right? That's literally the #1 search for college grads who want to get into tech. I'll tell you that's like the hardest career path. Super hard, super challenging. The guys that write software are really, really smart. But if that's your path, I mean, it's very lucrative. So engineering is one path. There's two other paths.
Like computer science.
So in general, that's all those paths would be under that same umbrella. I'll take one for sales, right? So someone makes the product, engineers it, right? Some guy like me has to go out and sell it so everyone can get paid. And then there's kind of this middle group of people who facilitate more of like the content around it. They're making sure there's a bridge between the people who make it and the people who sell it, right? So they're more of like the product marketing team. Does that make sense? By show of hands, of those three paths, who would want to go engineering?
Just one.
Why? I've never been in. Those people are smart. I'm in sales. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You should apply for a job in Sechrist.
You really should. You learn a lot. Sales. Who would want to go in the sales path? In the hat. Why would you want to do that?
I'm just more personally interested in like the sales aspect of technology versus being on the side of actually having to create it myself.
Literally, that's the path I want. As long as I feel like it's more of an education role, really, because there's so much cool technology out there. It's not like you're really selling; you're just letting somebody know. Tell me what's going on with you. What are your pain points? Maybe I can help you. Maybe I can't. But it's more of a teacher and a guide and an educator, really, than a sales guy. Anybody else? So everybody else would fit into that marketing bunch, or is tech just not what you guys would want to do for your career? In the back. Yeah. Tech's not where you want to go? Let me persuade you. I am in sales. So, so I'll take a lot of time just to talk about sales in general, right? So, when I got into this business, it was like 2012. And has anybody heard of Symantec? They had an antivirus product, Symantec Endpoint Protection. They had a consumer version called Norton Antivirus. You know what I mean? It's more for your personal computing. But we did that same kind of thing, antivirus for big companies. There were other things in it, but mostly what I did was an endpoint specialist. So I sold basically a blown up version of antivirus. So everybody's computer has some form of antivirus on it. We are selling it to big companies that have tens of thousands of employees globally. I think one thing to know about sales, I'll kind of break down how the whole thing goes, the good, bad, and ugly. When I started, they gave me a $2.4 million quota. I never sold tech a day in my life. I went to school for finance. I didn't know anything about technology. I literally hardly even knew what IT meant. $2.4 million quota. In 12 months, I sold $4.2 million worth of software. I will tell you my base salary at that job. Anybody want to guess? It's like 2012. Give me. That's way above. They give me 33,000. 33,000. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this in a minute, but in tech sales, in tech in general, they pay you either stock options or a thing called OTE. And if you remember anything, on target earnings is how everybody gets paid in tech. So it's basically like 50% of your money is guaranteed. The other 50% you have to produce to get that number. So in this example at Symantec, I was on a $66,000 OTE on target earnings on a 50-50 split, meaning if I didn't sell anything, I only took 33 home, right? Which, that wasn't good enough for my wife and kids. I wasn't going to be enough. So I had to sell beyond. So I think sales is good for someone who really wants to overachieve and really wants to take home that higher percentage. But it's not, it's super not easy, right? Think about calling up, I don't know, think of a company that here, I don't know, think of calling any major company and just being like, hey, want to buy something from me? Think how hard that is. I'll tell you a funny story. So when I was working with Sentinel One, we tried to sell, Sentinel One is an endpoint protection company, their modern version of antivirus called EDR. Have you heard of that? Endpoint detection and response. At some point in the industry, it wasn't good enough to just say there was a problem. You had to do something proactively to identify. So you had to somehow look at the user's behavior and say, oh, that's anomalous behavior. Let's kill quarantine and remediate accordingly. So it was like that was like the next gen version of EDR. But long story short, we were at Harvard trying to sell this against a really big competitor called CrowdStrike. And so we're sitting down, we think we're going to do the song and dance. And the guy's like, look, I get CrowdStrike for free. So unless you can give it to me for less than free, it's very nice meeting you. So that was kind of like, that's like getting the door slammed in your face, really, And so there's a lot of upside potential at Sentinel One or in sales in general, but there's a lot of rejection that comes with that too, right? So based on some of that, right, I'll just give you like a quick rundown, like quota 2.4 million. When I went to Veritas, it went to 42 million. Sentinel One, it was 2 million. Normalize, I think I hold an $8 million bag. So I always like to tell people, like, if you really think tech sales is a place you want to go, it's just a really performance-based thing. Does that cause any sense of fear anybody that said that they might want to go down that sales path? A little bit? Do you see more upside when you think about it? Or do you think more?
That's what you're saying. Like, you're basically capped on your max salary on top of the fact that you got to put in extra work.
I mean, so your boss wouldn't say that though, right? He would just say, like, if you're comfortable putting in 100 hours a week, like, there is no ceiling for your company. You know what I mean?
Oh, is that how it is? Like, if you keep selling, you'll keep making?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And then I think they always have a thing called like an accelerator. So let's just say you're getting 15% on everything you sell. They might give you an extra 1, 2, 3% on how much you overattain your quota. So I mean, the upside potential is there. There's really no cap. I say that kind of lightly because every every company wants to sell more for less, and paying commission to sales guys is one of those things that starts to go away. So I want to take you through a methodology because I talked a little bit about just some companies, but the array of cybersecurity paths that you can take is just absolutely astounding. So before I go to the next slide, I was going to ask, how many cybersecurity companies do you think are in play today? It's $15 gift card on the line to Starbucks, which I think is better than Dunkin' Donuts. It's a personal preference.
Like,
It's more than 1,000. It's less than 10,000.
probably like 5,538.
That's really good.
That was good.
You're over, but it's good. How about you? Nice. That's like price break closest without going over. Yeah, perfect. So in startup mode, so Normalize, I work for a company. It's been around for a year and a half. We're a Series A startup, which means we just got our first round of funding, which was like 22 million. So this is interesting just because there's 800 companies like the one I work for today that are all at some series of a startup. This part I think is really interesting because when you enter the job market, you're going to see a lot of the big names in cybersecurity. Can anyone think of a couple of big names?
Is that more? Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. I wouldn't rank them in like the top 50, but they're up there. Yeah. That's like VPN, like secure access to private networks. Do you know what I mean? So like what people don't think about would be like Microsoft is like top 5. Palo Alto, have you heard of them? Palo Alto Networks, huge. Some people think they're the #1 company in cybersecurity. Apple has a security practice, so does Verizon, so does AT&T, but they don't rank in the top tier because they don't consider themselves a vendor. They'd rather resell technology. And there's a huge market for reselling technology. I mean, those guys make good. Yeah, good one. Yeah. If you don't know the story about John McAfee, you should look that up. It's pretty hilarious. But McAfee is like an endpoint antivirus company. The guy who founded it was John McAfee. Got super rich, went way off the deep end. But it gives you an idea how deep the space is. I mean, it's super competitive. I mean, When I was selling endpoint, we had like 92 competitors, and I just thought it was funny. I asked ChatGPT, like, how many, please give me an approximation of the total number of cybersecurity vendor, and it was like, yeah, we basically don't know. So, so even ChatGPT ChatGPT doesn't know. But this just gives you an idea. So I mentioned, like, you can't even see that. I know that was the intent. There's the reseller. So I told you about the reseller market. There's people who make software, and then there's companies that resell that software. This is from a sales sheet for a company that resells technology, a big company called Optiv. They're headquartered in Denver, Colorado. But this is just one half of the things that they sell. It's just one half of it. This is the other half. If you look really close in the middle, McAfee's right there in the middle. But this just gives you an idea. So, like, if I was going into the job market and I was like, I want to work in tech, you at some point you're going to ask yourself, do I want to work for an established company or do I want to work for a startup company, right? So, in Butterfly, why would you want to work for an established company? Yes. Perfect. Yeah, you have a job in security, so it's more secure. That's absolutely right. Why would you want to work for a startup? Absolutely true. I worked for Sentinel One, and I think they gave me like 18,000 stock options to start. You don't get those all at once, but it's part of your compensation. And so I was there. I was there before, during, and after their initial public offering. So, I mean, it can be lucrative, right? But then there's a lot of startups that fail. But once you get like a block of stock options, they're usually on a 4-year vesting cycle. That makes sense, right? So they're like, we'll give it to you, but you only get a certain amount for as long as you work. And if you quit, then you don't get the rest. That makes sense? So you basically earn 25% of that stock option every year. But, just to kind of put it in perspective, if you worked for a startup company and they gave you stock options for $1 and that stock goes to like 100, that's just free money, right? There's tax implications on the back end when you liquidate, but I mean, that's how a lot of people in tech have really built their wealth, was off of the stock options that they got for being committed to like an early idea. But I can tell you, I spent a year and a half working for a Series A startup, and it's not easy. It's not easy. Okay. So I do think this is important. I think this gets missed in a lot. And I'll tell you just a quick personal anecdote. I went to school for finance. I was really passionate about doing marketing. I hit the job market. I was totally not qualified to get a job coming out of college. 100% not. I kind of like went from a couple of banks and worked in some finance. I didn't really like it. And then in the city I lived in, there was Symantec had a huge office, and I worked with 3,000 people who sold tech, right? So it was like being in like a university when I started, and that's how I had such early success because I was around hundreds of people who had been there and done it, right? Yeah.
What's that question? Coming out of college, is there a reason like you think like why you think he wasn't qualified? Or
Because I'd taken a finance route in college, so I took a whole bunch of accounting, a whole bunch of math classes, economics classes, and I wanted to be in marketing. I wanted to be like in advertising, and I totally missed the mark. And so I always try to stress to people, kind of think of that, like what do you want to be doing for, 5, 10, 15 years, day in and day out, when I came out of college, I tried to be a stockbroker. I thought that looked cool. I hated that job. I absolutely hated it. I made a ton of money, but I hated it. I watched lots of people lose their homes, their houses, their second houses, their retirement. And I was like, that's just not a field where you can help people from the bottom up. Unlike cyber, I can tell you a story about New Bedford. Like 5 years ago, do you guys know where New Bedford is down south? So I live in Fairhaven, right next to New Bedford. And New Bedford, the whole city got hacked. I don't know if anybody heard about this. So they got hacked, and it was like the fire department, no police department. They were taking babies off life support and things like that. I'll send you guys a link at the end of this, but it was just like, it really hit home, right? Because you're talking about not a very wealthy community. The ransom was for like over $1 million. And I worked closely with the mayor and the city to try to get that back online. I mean, you had literally had people on life support that weren't able to access life support. And so that's what that's what working in this field is about. Is there's the dark side of this business, the hacking, cyber attacks, and all that is so well funded. It's like you're really doing like real good work. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things you could sell. There's a lot of industries that you could get into. There's not very many industries where you can enter and literally be like, I'm helping the most vulnerable people in our community, and I'm doing it through technology. You know what I mean? It's like, it's pretty cool when you think about it, because you are like legitimately saving lives. Okay. So if you go into this business, let's just go around the room. I'll just go like across the front. We'll start with you on this side. OTE. We talked about it. Bang. ARR. We haven't talked about this yet. Pop quiz. Annual recurring revenue. That's super important if you're running a tech company. BDR. Business development rep. Any of you guys could do that job today, probably making 40 grand. AE. Account executive.
I was just an application engineer.
Application engineer. That's another. Application engineer or account executive, kind of depending. What was that? Oh, business development rep. It's pretty much like a cold caller. That's a hard job. A hard job. SE. Very close. Very close. Usually we think of it as system engineer or like a sales engineer. They kind of do the pre-sale. We call it the geek speak until somebody wants to buy something. ISR. Inside sales rep. MRR. It's kind of like ARR. Some companies bill on a monthly basis for security services, so they go monthly recurring revenue. TAM.
Technology acceptance model.
I'll take that. Territory account manager is another one. Sometimes when you get into this, you might have a boss that wants you to do a business plan for your territory. So you'd have to do like, what's the total addressable market in that area? I never like doing that. I actually am a CAM, so that's a channel account manager. So I build partnerships between tech vendors and tech resellers. So I'm kind of like, technology Cupid guy, kind of like that. Yeah. Partner account manager is Pam. And I think you guys probably know these ones on the right. Those ones are easy. Chief Technology Officer, Revenue, Operations Executive, and then CISO, I think that's the one that we sell to the most. So Chief Information Security Officer, it's kind of a big one. So that just gives you an idea of some of the job roles in the space. This, like, no one knows these. Like, professional salespeople don't even know these. And we pitch to like tons of companies, and even professionals in the business for like 20 years don't know some of these. But each of these represent a different silo of a market within cybersecurity, if that makes sense. So just to give you an idea, the company that I work for sells a thing called DSPM, which is Data Security Posture Management. I'll bore you with the details later if you want to know. One that's super popular, the two at the top, DLP and EDR, endpoint detection and response, or data loss prevention. Those are super huge. But everybody's come out with their own version. I think another one that is popular is GRC. It's basically governance, regulation for risk, and compliance. That's interchangeable, the R is, but that's basically just making sure that people adhere to the industry standards that they have to. So if they're financial or if they are a healthcare company, they have to treat customer records with a certain level of secrecy. When I worked with the city of New Bedford, when they got breached, there was an IR company, which is an incident response company. That part's super cool if you like CIS, or what is that? CSI, sorry. If you like CSI type stuff, if the company gets breached, they have a cyber insurance policy, and that will cover all the damage or the ransom that they have to pay to the attacker. But an incident response company is like a digital forensic investigating company. And then they come back and they kind of run the tape backwards and see what was the cause of the breach. But if you really like being like a detective, a digital forensic investigator it would be like right up your alley. That's not up my alley, but they do super cool work. It'd be kind of like watching the playback of a black box of a crashed airplane or something like that. Anybody that works in incident response, they're always the first responders when it comes to any kind of data breach or cyber attack. Some of these we can get into later if you would like, but this is just to show you how many different just sales paths that you could take in this industry. Oh man, it's a busy slide. So at the beginning, I kind of talked about like how would you protect this university if it was up to you to protect, right? So we saw a lot of different kind of silos or verticals of cybersecurity. This just gives you a better representation of how many different fields you can actually get into. And I will just tell you classically, if you think about computers being in somebody's physical building in their business, right? They call that on-premise. That's how everybody did cybersecurity, right? And they kind of lock down, like you see like the Mona Lisa and it's behind all this glass and it's inside the Louvre and it's all protected, right? And so it goes to show you that somebody like thought from the outside in how to protect that one valuable piece of art, right? It's not so different if you have intellectual property or patient records, customer credit card information, executive information. All of that stuff is of value to the business. But most people, I think, historically have built from the outside in with like firewalls, email security, endpoint protection, network security, basically saying if we can keep the bad guys out, then we won't have to worry about our data or our critical assets being breached, right? If we protect the infrastructure, then by default, what's inside would be safe. That hasn't really been the case because there's been a ton of data breaches where somebody through negligence or through their own ignorance has left the door open, and that's how cybersecurity attackers got in. So does that make sense? You almost have to like think about where are my most valuable assets and how do I protect that from the inside out? That's like 20 years of cybersecurity condensed into like 2 minutes. Does that general philosophy about protecting valuable stuff from the inside out or protecting it from the outside in, how that fundamentally and like from a philosophical standpoint is completely different? Does that kind of make sense? Would you vote one route better than the other? Outside in, inside out? What do you think? Yeah.
I would say inside out.
I really think so. I really do think. I think that's why I'm part of the startup that I work for, is that there's a lot of people that just don't think that's the way. They truly bought into if I build more walls and more moats and put more fences up, then I can always keep the bad guys out. My fundamental belief is that the bad guys is already there. You know what I mean? They're already inside. And you have so many people working remotely. You have distributed workforces. You have seasonal workers, contract workers. You have legal teams, executive teams, marketing teams, all who get different levels of access, right? We're dealing with this big grocery store, the same grocery store. You guys know Stop and Shop? So the company that owns them, we were talking to them, and they have 700,000 data stores, 700,000 cloud accounts. There's no way that you could manage 250,000 employees and all the different boxes they have access to. We couldn't do that manually. That's an impossible thing to do. And so I think where the future is going is kind of like two pieces, like whoever's storing the data, right? Like AWS or Google is storing a lot of data. Oracle has a cloud. Alibaba has a cloud. Data storage or data security is like the two, I think, broad places where the most innovation and the most money is going to be made over the next 10, 15, 20 years. It's a lot to think about. So this one's kind of hard to read, but it's basically saying there should be, within 10 years, we're probably looking at a total global market for cybersecurity somewhere around $1 trillion within 10 years. And that's globally. So you can see that North America is one of the bigger consumers, but APAC, even Middle East and Africa, huge consumers. just gives you an idea of why there's 3,000, 4,000 companies trying to be the next big cybersecurity company. Man, so this is that one I was telling you about, just kind of three broad classes. Take a second just to see the personalities associated with each. So I think this will kind of give you an idea of which path you want to take. I will tell you, I've seen a lot of people start on the engineering side and see the money being made on the sales side and are real effective because they kind of understand the core basic fundamental pieces of engineering and then they flip that into sales time. And so I've seen a lot of people be really successful at that. I will tell you, I've sold a lot of technology and I am not an engineer. I'm tech dependent if anything, but I do know how to ask good questions and I do know how to find someone's pain. And I think I know how to educate people. That's super important.
Do you generally have to limit yourself to one of those paths, or is there any overlapping?
So I think I'd say the best evolution, if I had it to run back, I probably would have started with more engineering fundamentals. I was just lucky because I was around seriously hundreds of really, really talented people, but not everybody's path is like that. So I would get good at the science and the fundamentals of IT, and then I would take it to sales. But this piece, the product marketing and management piece, is kind of like the synthesis of both. It's like you're smart enough to be an engineer, you're slick enough to be a sales guy, but you're the bridge between that, and that's usually what people consume, your average everyday consumer. So you got to be like a hybrid kind of person to fit there, but those guys make a ton of money. If you think about tech, just think how much money is in tech. When you talk about the product marketing and management team, it's just, you're talking big money, big money. And the guys that do that really well, and you start seeing like acquisitions happen, somebody on the product management team is literally like, how are we going to take these two different technologies and put them together? It's not an easy job, you know? It's not an easy job at all. But yeah, I would do that. I'd go 1, 2, 3. I don't think I'll ever be on that that side. I don't think I'll ever be there. But the peers that I look up to are so good at that space. It's pretty cool area if you get to it. It's pretty cool. It's almost like building the game. Like if you thought of like software engineering. Okay, so everybody knows there's kind of like two sides to the sale, right? Like what happens before, what happens after. Um, there's not a lot of things in life that you buy that post sale is so important, right? Like maybe your car, like how do I maintain this and keep it on the road? So think if I'm running a business and I'm responsible for data security, right? Buying the solution is like just the first part of it. At some point, I got to get mass adoption from my staff. I got to learn how to use it effectively. I got to maintain it. I got to get expert help on how to run it better. So on one side, you have everything that's like the guy who gets you to the point, like the headhunting guy. He schedules all the calls. He kind of primes you and educates you to the point that you want to buy it. And then there's a whole other team called customer success, who literally just handhold your customer through the onboarding and adoption process. And then if that all goes well, they come back and stay loyal and then you start renewing. But does that broad separation between what happens at the beginning before a sale and what happens after at the end, does that make sense? I personally think that when it comes to sales, it's easier to keep customers, keep what you have than to always buy new people. There's a lot of people that work on that side of the house post sale that just support the needs of a customer, which is I mean, if you really think about it, it's low level tech and it's high value relationship. You know what I mean? You're basically doing a lot of the stuff that a lot of people don't want to do. Most people in sales, they're kind of like on to the next one. You kind of need someone that wants to be a farmer, that wants to continue to harvest and grow that relationship. So I always like to tell people, if you don't think like doing cold calls and like being an aggressive sales guy, being subjected to a lot of rejection, there's a way to play a role in the sales process from a support side where you get to really bring experience and relationship to the table, which when you think about IT, I think sometimes it's kind of left out of the equation. But the companies that treat their customers the best, I mean, goes without saying, they stay around longer. You know what I mean? So think about that. If that's appealing to you, it's called customer success. It's super cool. It's underrated, but I have seen a lot of if you look this up, CXOs. It's like the newest thing. Chief Experience Officer. I know it's not. There's already a CEO, so they had to do CXO. But I'm telling you, that's probably like if I looked on LinkedIn, that's probably like the newest job that's out there is Customer Experience Officer. It's huge. Yeah,
Quick question.
yeah.
There's like so many companies basically doing the same thing, protecting data. What is like, what's the range of quality? And
Great question. Seriously, great question. Like, okay, so I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm gonna answer it in the form of like a question. Tell me, just in the room, like, tell me about the biggest purchase you've made. Like, you don't have to tell me, but think in your head, like, what's the biggest thing that you bought?
like say like a iPhone, like
Okay, there you go.
an iPhone.
Anything else? Anything else? Big purchases? Like a car? Like, TV, I don't know, TV, gaming system? Throw something out. I'm all ears. There you go. There you go. What kind? Okay. Got clap. Anything else? So it's not so different, but think about your buying process before you got that, before you looked at the actor, right? Think about your buying process. Right? Did you probably knew to a high degree what you wanted before you even went out? That's kind of how the consumer is. But let's just say, did how many different cars did you try before you got to the actor? So you see what I'm saying? Like the customer is going to kind of predetermine what they want. And the other thing that I think that I've learned in sales is that most customers don't do a good job of evaluating multiple options. They just people aren't like that. Like you're not like that in your life. You're not like, hey, I'm gonna look at 10 cars, I'm gonna go through like consumer reports, I'm gonna buy the best one. That's not really how you do it. You kind of like narrow it in to two before you even walked out the door, before you even ordered online. You know what I mean? And I think that's how customers are. Like nowadays, they're super educated and they almost pre-qualify themselves before you see them. And that's why I think the job is more around educating people than like selling them. Because everybody wants to buy. There's nobody like feeling like they were sold. You know what I mean? And so as long as you're being honest and just educating them through the process, you're more guiding them to the answer they already made for themselves. But like on the flip side of that, I do think there's a lot of noise. Like I compete in a really crowded space. Data security, like every company sounds the same. But from a quality standpoint, we point out things like when you scan an environment in the cloud, it's like watering your grass. So the more you scan, the more it costs. Then the more it costs the customer. So from a quality standpoint, we're like, if we could do one single path and classify everything all at once, that would save you compute costs when it comes to your cloud vendor, right? So like us being better at it is like, and that's just a piece of the education because on face value, most customers wouldn't even know that, wouldn't even think to ask that question. So, but I think that's part of being like an honest, ethical representative of whatever company or whatever product you're presenting, you know. But I think finding those nuances, that I mean, it's difficult, and I think that's where the expertise in sales really comes from. Is like knowing the nuances and what your competitor does better than you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with telling someone like, hey, I just don't do that. I know a company that does do that. You should look at them. But I think the times where I've failed in sales is trying to really sell someone and not listening to what they wanted. And I think at the end that just spoils the relationship and it hurts your company in the long run. That's just my opinion. When I was in finance, we ended up selling a lot of stuff that people didn't need. Um, yeah, you can make it through your career and be really successful just being straight up honest with people and giving them what they need. Most people, if they really need it, they'll come to you and ask for it. You just got to guide them to the right place. But it's a great question. I told you software engineers like the number one search. But I think a lot of people see it because there's a ton of money there. I just think it's a really difficult path to get to. So I wanted to show you that most people end up in a sales role, really in tech in one of these. And so there's so many different kinds of sales that you can do within tech. I wanted to kind of like circle back to the money piece of things, just because obviously you're going to enter the job market and you're going to want to earn some type of money. I wanted to show you this just because it kind of shows a couple places you could take your career on the engineering side of things. And if you don't really understand, you can say like the top performers are making the most money and the mediocre people are making the least money in these different job areas. If you were to take a more engineering path out of college and not sales, that makes sense. So you could work for companies that sell technology, who resell technology, or you could work for like a healthcare company that doesn't have anything to do with tech other than protecting their patient information, if that makes sense.
So if you were going to go into one of these career paths, here at Bentley, what do you think you would major in?
CIS and data analytics.
CS and data analytics. Perfect.
Data scientist, this one in the middle, that one's huge. A lot of companies I work for.
So what I would suggest to you is if you think you might want to go into a sales path, and you might major in marketing, but you also might then minor in data science, or minor in CIS, or minor in data, some of these technology fields. So you can pair a major in sales or marketing with or finance with a minor in a technology field. So you have both sets of background skills. The degree you get at Bentley will prepare you so that you'll be able to learn the things you need to know to do these kinds of jobs when you get out of school. What's interesting to me is that a lot of these jobs we don't see accountants everywhere. We don't see marketing roles. These top jobs are all tech jobs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'll show you one other slide just because I wanted to put it in perspective. This is more the sales side of things, a super confusing slide. But essentially it's saying, are you in sales development? Are you an inside sales rep? Are you doing some sort of management, or are you outside, like in the field doing field sales? But just to give you an idea, like I think that anybody in this room, not saying you'd want to, but the sales development role, what, 46 grand a year? Top earners making 72? Not bad, right? It's more than I made straight out of college. Way more than I made. So it's not bad, right? And it's literally like, here's the phone list, call, hey, do you want to have a meeting? That's the whole job. It's the whole job. And your whole job is based on setting appointments. And they're doing like 46 calls a day. It's totally achievable, right? I just want to ask the room, like, is just looking at that, no real knowledge needed, is that appealing? So, yeah.
How far can you take it to like a scale based job?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people start there and then move, like kind of moves on the path that way. When I worked at Sentinel One, I actually never did the SDR role in tech. I did it at other companies. I started at inside sales, and so I wasn't making as much as the average is now. But like this is what you could get like if you were an inside salesperson. I just think the sales development piece is good because you end up doing the hardest work, which is calling complete strangers and asking them to take a meeting. It's hard. It's hard, but if you can do that good, the selling piece is super easy. Getting the meetings is hard. But I'm not even joking. Like not learn another thing, not learn another thing in your life, and you could do that job today, and it could springboard you into a whole bunch of other things. I just always curious if it was appealing because I never actually did it, but I can tell you like just to hit some of those goals, like 42 million, like I easy was making like 200 calls a day some days. Those are like big numbers. Big numbers. But is there something that you see here that kind of stands out to you guys, either management or like the outside sales team? Anything on this that's curious or I could give a little more explanation about? The management piece is super interesting, just because you end up managing salespeople or people who do cold calls. I never really liked that piece. Typically, really good performers end up in management roles. It's like taking Michael Jordan off the floor and being like, "You want to be a coach?" Well, probably not going to get the same result from him on the bench. So, I could tell you a couple like the dirty little secrets of the job. You guys want to hear about a little bit of that? So if you start with a startup company, right, you might end up with like uh, 10 states, right? Like 10 geographical states to work. The further along that company gets, the more mature it gets, the longer it's in business. They kind of like shrink your territory, right? So it's like a dirty little secret of the industry. So they take territory and it takes away from you, but then your quota continues to go up. You know what I mean? So it's I always try to put that in perspective that so that what does that say to you? Like at some point you have to like pack your bag and like go to the next company because you're gonna get to a point where your return isn't gonna be what it once was. Like in early startup companies, there's sales reps making like 20% on deals. That's huge. Like real estate, if you sold real estate, you make 3%. Put it in perspective. But if you work in finance, you get a basis point. That's 0.001% of what you bring in. Imagine making 20% on $1 million. Big money. People are doing that all the time. But I will tell you, like, there's just a lot of things to consider about earning money that way. It's 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 up and down. So I always try to tell people there's a lot of good, but there's a lot of negative things that mature companies do to salespeople to like become profitable for their shareholders. So you kind of got to know the waters that you're swimming in. And I would say it's pretty lucrative, but there are pitfalls along the way. But that's kind of like the same in anything that you do. Um, I always thought that this was kind of interesting because people will think about what other kind of sales could I do and make the same kind of money. The two most profitable places are in health, IT, and software. So, I mean, I'm not saying you have to sell or that you should sell, but I'm thinking if you're going to sell anything, it should be for the highest percentage possible. That's just my opinion. Because you have to do the same amount of work. Um, so yeah. Now I'm just kind of curious. Like this is more my Q&A. Like career paths, right? Like I know this is like far down the road for you. You know what I mean? But are there some job paths that you guys like really want to go down? Not technically. I'm just kind of curious. We start in the back, maybe in the orange.
Like even tech or financial consultants.
Yeah.
I worked at a sales and IT company last summer with BAR.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Which one?
It's called Eastern Computer Exchange.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. We sold like a lot of Dell products,
Yeah.
DCR and stuff.
Absolutely.
To answer my question, I was going to ask where you thought the space would be moving, like more off-prem, but that was good.
Yeah. That's a good experience. Value added reseller is awesome. Some of those guys make 40%.
Yeah,
That's not even a joke, man. Like some of those guys are just monsters. Value added reseller, MSP, MSSP, they all resell technology to a certain degree and services around the technology. Great company though. That's a good company. That's good experience.
yeah.
Um, it's interesting just because like the future of this business, I know a lot of people talk about AI and generative AI, and I think that's going to be an important space. But this kind of controversial opinion, but kind of like Bitcoin, I think nobody doubts the value of the blockchain or anything like that. It's just these massive players in the game are just going to take that technology, integrate it to what they already have. They're going to reduce their cost of transaction, and you're still going to get charged the same. You know what I mean? It's like I feel the same way about this industry to a certain degree, where I think generative AI is going to be adopted by everybody's going to adopt it, right? And they're going to enhance their performance of their deliverables, but the cost to you on the end as a consumer is still the same or more. You know what I mean? And we obviously don't have the time to go how destructive AI can be, but yeah, I mean it's going to be a piece of the puzzle. I don't know that I'd stake my career on moving to the next generative AI company, just because every company is adopting that into their technology stack. If you're developing software today and you're not building with AI, clearly you're not going to be in the game much longer. So I don't think of that as like a competitive differentiator. Like everybody's doing machine learning and AI. Cool. You know what I mean? Now what? So I think the thing that's cooler is like the like social engineering, but the reverse of it, seeing what people are susceptible to and building protocols and procedures in place that account for human stupidity. I think that's the biggest gap is there's people get fooled so easily these days. You wouldn't think it happened. Did you guys hear about this MGM breach? You guys hear about that? This is not even a joke. It's not even a joke. A group out of London, these are like 20-year-old kids, call up, they call the help desk. They're like, "Hey, I'm locked out of my access to the entire MGM infrastructure." Right? The IT help desk guy goes, sends it over. This is not a joke, right? The guy had like the login and password to the entire MGM platform. And it's not just one casino. We're talking hundreds of properties, right? And they were physically locked down for 10 days. Cost them like, think of a casino can't run for an hour, for a day, for a week. Like how much money are they losing, right? And so that's that happened in October last year. So, and MGM has like every piece of software that you could possibly have, but they haven't accounted for human stupidity. And that's why I think there has to be a different approach to it. And that's what I hope like you guys bring to the table is like tech is great, but at some point there still has to be someone manning the plane. There has to be a human element to this because there has to be an interpretation of what's being done. With that being said, I don't know how much time we have left.
I got about 10 minutes or so.
Oh, cool.
So, we should end up going hard quickly, so we're not gonna take time for questions. So,
Yeah.
so 4 minutes.
Before you ask any questions, I actually did I worked 10 years in finance, and I worked for Chase, and I worked for Wells Fargo, I worked for Washington Mutual. You guys might not know about that. And then I worked in digital advertising for a long time. So if there's things that you're curious about from a career path standpoint, I mean, I'm here. I'm definitely willing to help. But what questions come to mind?
All of them again.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, if you ever have questions you want to ask offline, you can go ahead and reach out to me anytime. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. But yeah, what questions come to mind? Yeah,
So you said you made this by
yeah.
so what made you eventually change your mind and was because you didn't like working or was it the subject itself?
No, okay, so I got into finance and I basically came from a family without very much money and genuinely thought like I could help people like that struggle like me get to a place of financial security. And that's not how retail banks are built. That's just not why they have all the money. You know what I mean? It's not built on helping people without money. It, it's legitimately predatory to people who don't have money, right? So if you get higher interest rate just because you have a lower credit score, you come from a lower socioeconomic background, that makes the company more money, right? So they have a financial benefit from your financial lack of success or your failure financially is their gain, you know? And that's ultimately why. I mean, so in the time I was in finance, there was a tech bubble burst. It was like in the late 90s, and I was an intern at the SOC office. 9/11 happened, right, in 2001. People lost their, these people I was like, bring all your money, right? And I'll invest it for you. They lost it, right? I stay in finance. I start working for a retail bank because I'm like, it'll be more secure, be like easier. I'll be able to like, if JP Morgan isn't going to screw somebody, right? And like, we were literally like helping people borrow money and then turn around and like invest it in the stock market. People are losing their houses. I woke up one morning, I went to work, and there's like 100 protesters outside my office, the place I worked for like 5 years. And like, I literally watched friends and family lose their life savings. And I was like, I'm not going to do this to me. And like all my gain, I'm sitting here watching people like lose everything. And I'm not trying to say that all those companies are bad. I'm just saying there's a financial incentive to see some people fail. And I didn't want to put a smile on that ugly picture. So in 2008, after the mortgage meltdown, I was just like, I had to find something different. And I tried to work for myself for a little bit. That was super hard. And then I got the job at Symantec. And that was like, I mean, I did so good that first year that it was like, I'll never leave this. And it felt better though, because I felt like I was really helping people. I don't know.
How do you think AI is going to be integrated into data security?
I mean, like the huge pieces around, like think if you have like a huge data store, like you're a massive network, right? You somehow need to be able to comb through that, and you just can't do that unless you use AI tools.
How do you do that now?
So I think there's been a popular version of AI that's been released in the last year or so, but all these companies have been using a form of AI for the last 20 years. I mean, technically, artificial intelligence goes back to the 60s. Like it's not like new. It's just not. It's just being applied in a completely new way. And the big thing about artificial intelligence is literally about the information you feed it. You know what I mean? So you got to teach the model, right? And most of the AI tools that we are familiar with today are what they call large language models, LLMs, large language models, and that's basically just looking at words and then leveraging AI to kind of parrot that back. You know what I mean? But if you think about that, there's no human element there, and it's full of irrationality. You know what I mean? And that's the product of what kind of information that model, that AI learned off of. I'll give you an example. So like, does anybody know Ginkgo Bioworks here in Boston? Ginkgo Bioworks? They're a super awesome company. So they do research and development as a service, right? So you think of like Pfizer or Moderna or Eli Lilly, anybody that's making like pharmaceutical drugs, you know what I mean? Think about how much money it takes to like produce a drug, like from scratch, right? So this company, they're literally in Boston, super cool company. Instead of let's just say Pfizer coming up with the next COVID, right? They extend it to this lab. In this lab, all they do for companies all over the world is research and development as a service. So they've done hundreds of millions of variations in tests on different chemical compounds and what they're going to do, right? So then a company can just come in and say, I want that one specific study that you did that we heard cures weight gain, whatever. But they're for the first time applying AI models and learning models to molecular science, like they've never done this before, right? They really, honestly, God haven't. So there's right now, there's like literally down the street, they're breaking apart the genome based on how they're applying AI to molecular science. It's super cool if you really think about it. But honestly, the big limitation in AI has just been like, you know how humans are, we get so used to something. That's the biggest reason AI is not taking off. And I think some people like Elon want to corner the market, and so he keeps telling people it's bad, even though he's using it all the time. So
Can you switch
yeah, to the last one, yeah, absolutely.
while we take less couple questions, there's a QR code here for your attendance. So we should complete that and also the survey that goes with it. There's a couple questions on there. You can do, you can answer while we take the last two questions this afternoon.
Question.
So the people have been doing that really good start, whether it will establish or start.
Yeah, you don't want to start with a startup. I'm just telling you, you just don't. I'm being dead serious. Like it's so much better to go work for a company that has like established customers and processes. I can tell you like it's hard to understand how when you have a good reputation as a company, how customers come to you, like I was saying. And you just have to help guide them. Would you like fries with that order? You know what I mean? They're walking in the door. That's so much easier. But like when you have to really go hunt it down, it is extremely difficult, and you got to have thick skin, and it's super tough. It's selling an idea to people like that. Like I don't really have that problem. You know, it's really difficult. But yeah, work for a company that's established, and then after 2 or 3 years, that'll give you tons of experience. And sometimes I think what you learn is more than what you earn initially. Um, there's this book called by Robert Greene called Mastery, and there's something that says like you have to have 10,000 hours of like application to anything before you're actually an expert at it. That's like a long time if you think about it. It's like 7 years working 40 hours a week. So I don't know. I think if you want to be good at something and you have the patience to like get to that expert level, like I mean, the sky's the limit, seriously. Um, I do encourage you, like, as you kind of progress through your education and into your early career, that I honestly believe that if you find something that you just like doing every day, I actually like educating people about stuff that they don't know. And I've done that in different parts of my career. But I think some people underestimate how long you spend working in your life. You know what I mean? And while you're young, like take the time to figure out what you really like doing. Because you're going to be doing it for a long time if you want to be real good at it. That'd be like the biggest piece of advice. And if you like it and you're consistent and true to it and it provides benefit to others, the money will come. I don't care what field you go into. But if you know you're in a field like I realized hurting people financially, like I couldn't look myself in, you know. So you got to find something that you can put your all into that you know is some benefit for the next generation. It sounds stupid, but you know, I have a daughter and I want it to be better for her than it was for me, you know, and that can't be if like cyber criminals are like running the world. Like that's not gonna help, you know. So it's up to you to do your part.